Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the Holochain ecosystem session number 5. Today we have Connor from Sprillow with us, and it's the 2nd of October 2020. So
a momentous day.
A momentous day. evening over here in Europe, and afternoon, I guess, for you, Connor.
Mm-hmm.
Right, super. Well, would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Connor Turland, and let's see, just in terms of this Holochain space, there's a long history. I wouldn't begin to be able to scratch back into every bit of it, but I have had kind of knowledge and contact with the people let's say the minds behind Holochain for longer than since Holochain has existed. So that's kind of an interesting place for me to come to in terms of like talking now about Holochain, because there was a set of relationships that existed before this was ever a thing that kind of heralded me into the ecosystem in the first place, heralded me into working with the company at some point in some way, and then though I was no longer with the company, still maintaining working relationships with some of the key architects, Eric and Arthur and others of Holochain, maintaining those relationships and continuing to contribute. I'm inspired by their vision, and I also think that I bring something to it in terms of generationally we're different, and we come from a different generation of developers like myself, and so there's like really different perspectives, some overlapping perspectives that have always made for a rich kind of back and forths and conversations. And now I've been working, after diving down into the level of like the framework of Holochain while being with the company during those times, like I've been at the application layer for the last year now. We're just like building things on Holochain, which is both are fun and interesting, but right now I'm getting a thrill out of like, well, here's what we're creating. Here's the people that are going to touch this software, and getting through to the end users, I suppose, with what I'm creating now, and looking at use cases like clean energy and the red grid stuff, or waste or food. These are kind of the areas in terms of sustainability that really guide me and inspire me, and those are the ones where I want to build things in those areas and apply the capabilities with the technology to those kinds of urgently and important impacts that we need to have right now. Yeah.
Super, thank you. I'm really looking forward to learning more about what you're up to, and seeing how you're weaving the history and the experiences and what you've learned over time into what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
So you've been working on Acorn, and I think Acorn's well known to people within the Holo and Holochain membranes, probably not so well known outside, but can you tell us a little bit about what Acorn is and how it works?
Mm-hmm. So Acorn is a funny kind of name and metaphor. Before it was a piece of software, it was kind of a methodology, or a nascent methodology, like a kind of a conceptual framework for productivity, personal and collective productivity and project management and stuff like that, where you're trying to it entertains the idea that you've got a way that you want to see the world, something that you wish to accomplish, and you could call that a state of affairs that you wish to see become a reality. And so it's sort of like a way of describing in detail what is that reality that you want to see become true in the world. And then it gives you the tools for, it's named Acorn because there's almost like an experience of climbing and being like a squirrel in a tree that you have to do to get from here to there. So that's true because you take your some kind of high level ambition, this is up at the top, and then you break it down into all the little things that would need to happen up and up and up to get so that this would just be true if all these other little things were true. And so you work away at the little little parts at the bottom, and it's sort of a trickle up effect because what you do at the bottom layer, everything small and achievable becomes, oh, all of a sudden I've accomplished this very high level ambition that I had. And so important to the concept of that is, of course, you can think of it like a data structure, but it's also so much more than a data structure. It's a metaphor that we use everywhere in the world, which is the metaphor of the tree, a tree of knowledge, family trees. Every kind of tree is kind of there's a long history of using those, and so again, it's using a tree, and that but it's sort of like an inverted tree because all the leaves are at the bottom in a sense, and we say the roots are at the top. You could also flip it upside down so that you had the roots and the leaves. That might actually make more sense. I think we were actually thinking about making it so that you could tailor it to your preference. You could have the tree up this way or down this way. roots to branches, like, or however. And yeah, that this tree as a data structure and a metaphor and a whatever is a really important and useful structure if we start to work with it. And that's kind of the principle of Acorn. And then we play around with the metaphors of squirrels being squirrels and the acorns in the tree, and the productivity, kind of that sense of productivity that you get. So it's a pretty playful kind of concept and idea, but then we took it through a design process, and originally it was prototyped on Miro, but we took it through its own design process. What would it look like if we did this from scratch and really built this from scratch? And weren't just leveraging kind of a visual whiteboard to do it, but if it had its own, if the data structure and everything in the application reflected the system that we were building. So then we built it from scratch, and we're still, I mean, it's still a work in progress. We would still call it prototype level software, but it's also somewhat polished. It's visually appealing. It's kind of fun to use, and we're looking forward to the kinds of things that are going on right now, like the refactoring work that we're doing to bring it to Holochain, the RSM version right now. So that's, that's a work in progress, obviously not done. And the version I'm going to show you is the version on Holochain Redux. But I think that transformation and that leap is going to be an interesting and exciting one too.
Cool, thank you. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. Just before, tell me a little bit about like what do you believe about the world that makes what you're working on so important?
That one, you'd kind of like, Acorn might have some small role to play in that, but it goes, way beyond that. But as you say, it's what do I believe about the world? Well, for one thing, I believe in don't despair. That despite what appears to be dire circumstances and dark times that have already come to face us, and certainly like during my lifetime and my childhood and growing up, it always seemed like certainly the future was being painted in black colors, and so it's kind of really easy to go to despair confronted with that. I don't know whether I think I just, it's my personal survival strategy not to despair. It's just like, it's just go to hope, go to optimism, and find something to do with yourself, something to do with your hands. Also come from a family of people who are very creative with their hands and builders, and of course I built software, and that's a really different kind of thing to build than houses, which my dad built, or my grandpa, or different people in my family. But I still feel like there's a thread of continuity there of get busy with your hands and make things, and you feel good doing that. So yeah. And yeah, so obviously, like, I'm not speaking a lot to you don't have to really elaborate on what are the challenges anyways. The challenges are all pretty obvious. It's really, the questions are really about what are we going to do about it, what's going to be the solutions that we're going to look to, and also how are we going to be with each other along the way.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, you talked a little bit about not going to despair. What are the other practices you have, or the things you do to keep moving in the world at the moment?
Learning, just like really focus on what you can learn, and like come to grips with what you don't know, and then expand your mind. Be humble. You don't know, you're never going to know it all, but just set out with curiosity, and don't box in your ideas about what's going to be relevant and what's not, because so many times you're going to take something, the lessons from one thing, and apply it to another thing. So like, you've set out to learn a language, or to learn about the body, or to learn about right now I'm like digging into so many things about the nature of money and debt, and the economy and economics, like, so they're just fascinated with those things, and just like kind of dive into them. And so I find learning is another huge practice of keeping yourself afloat, and keeping yourself like on your own edge, like your learning edge, right? And staying curious and staying humble, and that's a big part. I think, I don't know, as you say that, I'm aware of like the gaps for me too. Like, I would say I could take better care of my body, still an issue. I still like, as much as you try and stuff, but it's yeah, those are some of the really important things. And also, it's made a huge difference. We're in a kind of a virtual time, but the fact that the business that we run, Sprillow, is me and my partner, and we share a household, and we share eye contact, and a stand-up in a room every single day, I find makes a huge difference for me in terms of like my ability to stay just engaged, and to stay motivated, because I found like all my motivation was kind of going out the door, as well as my optimism, from a purely virtualized set of interactions. So if you, whatever, like, the face-to-face contact you're able to have, and like whatever you're able to do with someone, build, yeah, it's great to be distributed, but it's also great to have like the physicality and the co-locatedness, and that's been a huge part of, like, I think, staying successful in the context of COVID, and even before COVID, I was finding it was the same thing. I was really relying really heavily on just what are the day-to-day interactions, and that keep me in my body, in the physical space, and not just totally going into abstraction sphere, virtualized spaces.
Tell me a little bit about Holochain. Like, what do you believe about Holochain? What keeps you building on this technology and in the ecosystem?
Well, I think I've known for quite a few years that, like, we had to go through a transformation in the technology landscape, because I was building an open source platform in, like, 2012 to 2015, and we were just building a web app, and my friend was really kind of, like, cued into the kind of the trajectory, and he had us join this personal data consortium, I think it was called, the personal data consortium, and it was before personal data was really an option in a concrete sense. It was kind of like an idea, guiding idea. It was at the frontier of the idea that like maybe the cloud wasn't such a perfect, flawless scheme, and but at the same time, we were building a thing that was essentially a cloud thing, a web app, and we've got our database, and so we had our eyes on the future, but we were building with what we could build at the time. So it kind of, and it became a point of frustration too, because we're having to maintain this infrastructure and pay costs for an open source platform that we're not charging anybody for. And so you're seeing the breakdown too, like, firsthand. You're like, why are we incurring our own costs to give everyone something for free? And yeah, we can build the software, and the software is not the problem. It is the hosting, in a sense, that's the problem, because the hosting is what we're paying for, not the creation of the software. The software can run on anyone's computer for free if it could. So anyways, these were kind of the precursors, and then it was just before, it was late 2018 when I think I freed up from anything else that I was doing and kind of stepped back from everything. I thought, I'll kind of reevaluate what do I want my focus to be. And for that time, I'd been on the application layer kind of focus. And then I thought, no, this infrastructure on which the application I was building has been such a huge issue in the process of building it. So that was the point at which I thought, I think I should turn my attention towards infrastructure, towards some kind of framework or protocol, or something that's going to make a difference at the level of how do these things run, how are they designed, what are the low level designs that inform the high level ones. And then I started researching around the same time protocols like Secure Scuttlebutt and Holochain, and then I think I got swept up into some Holochain hackathons, and there was such a kind of momentum around those things, and a need for someone to be going to the hackathons, and I saw myself pretty inspired by doing that. That all of a sudden I was going down this pathway of, like, learning so much more about Holochain, and not just learning but teaching. And so then you learn the most by teaching too. So yeah, I've always felt kind of like it's not the only solution, but it's one solution that definitely touches on one of the core challenges that I see around the way that the cloud is designed and the way that people give up their personal data. We are the product and all those things. So the fact that I'm kind of, well, I think it has its own use cases that are kind of separate and even complementary to the use cases of the other protocols that are also being under kind of under development, under investigation. You know, all of this stuff is still, in a sense, at a experimental kind of stage in a way, and yeah, the fact that they arise from slightly different use cases in mind, and that Holochain is designed with some currencies in mind, that's a huge point of interest for me, because and that it's not blockchain. It's not blockchain, but it has currencies in mind, and that's kind of a very interesting sweet spot for it to sit at, because blockchain definitely has its own problems, and yeah, that it presents an alternative, like and comes along with the concept of mutual credit, goes hand in hand with the concept around mutual credit currencies and stuff, is I would say a key point of interest for me, because of also my interest in economics and that kind of thing. Because you have other protocols there that are just doing peer-to-peer and gossip, and but they don't do as much of the kind of validation and the stuff that you really need to be there to have a currency built with it. So I would say that it's kind of funny building like a project management application with it, because I think it can work equally well as a number of other databases or different kinds of patterns for something like that. You can put data into it and get it back out. It's when you get into the validation and currency type stuff where you really want security, yeah, those security considerations and stuff like that, that you see it's like, oh, it shines in this application.
Okay, well, I think it could be time for you to show us a little bit of Acorn, and then bring it to life in a project management kind of application.
Yeah. Cool.
I will make sure you're able to share your screen. Yep, everyone can share. Great.
So yeah, so just like a quick primer on it. So there's kind of a couple of open source repositories that are hosted under the Harris-Brown Enterprises GitHub organization, and yeah, that Acorn is a project that's funded by them, and is kind of a gift to the Holochain ecosystem in a way, both from the perspective of the intention and hope that it can serve as a project management application for for projects soon, once it's actually kind of reaches that maturity. Also, it's kind of a gift on the level of the code itself, because it's open source, and we've gone really far in the code in terms of to make sure that it's clean code, quality code, maintainable code, well-designed code that has solid patterns and stuff too. So it's really meant to be, in a way, an example that other people can kind of follow, as much on the level of the code itself as maybe the use of the application too. So it kind of has those two different purposes for why it's around. And yeah, it's been so I work with my partner in business and in life, 𝐀𝐜𝐨𝐫𝐧, and she's a designer, and we started business Sprillow, and Sprillow got hired to work on Acorn, and she set out on the design process, and eventually we were building. We were as well doing some of the development for a time period with Ace and Eduardo, some of Eduardo's team. Yeah, so those are some of the credits rolling. Yeah, so first of all, I wanted to point towards kind of Acorn release, which is a repository that's just out there on GitHub. It's the only place, so we don't have a website right now for Acorn. There's a couple of spots where I think you can get linked to it, for example, through Harris-Braun Enterprises, probably our projects. Yeah, this would take you there through HB, and you can also get to it through the through the Sprillow website. So those bring you here, and then we roll releases, and the releases are so far for Mac and Linux. And what was really exciting was when 𝐀𝐿 kind of enabled us to have that networking breakthrough, because we actually could play multiplayer, multiplayer Acorn, and cross-platform from Linux to Mac. And when we hit that point with it, it was really exciting. So we did some really kind of interesting stuff as well to provide security and privacy in a certain feature that I'm going to show you too. So yeah, so anyways, just before this, I wanted to start from a fresh slate. So I just cleared my local version of it and downloaded this one. When you download it, then it's just an unzip, and I'm gonna put it, yeah, and then you can put it into your applications folder. Let's do that. Let's put it into applications. And yeah, so this is an Electron app. This is, it runs, it basically starts Holochain up itself in the background in order to run. And meanwhile, the front end and the whole package is just kind of like it builds like a native app and has a logo and runs locally off your machine. And we tried to really round out the experience. So it has everything from kind of the splash screens at the start of like launching it, gives you a vision of what does this do. You just hop through the panels. And here we talk a little bit about make collaboration happen peer-to-peer. So help your distributed team to stay on track with changes and updates, communicate easily, avoid double work, and help each other accomplish your goals. Acorn is even built on peer-to-peer technology called Holochain. And yeah, kind of the idea of collective intelligence. So sign me up. I can leave this blank. And it's been really interesting playing with what are the important design patterns to kind of utilize to get people familiar with what does a system look like that runs on Holochain, or even, you know, and that anything, a lot of these protocols run with private key, public key, cryptography, and those kinds of things. A lot of people don't know what that stuff is, but just starting to introduce it gently here, like you don't know what you can do with your public key or maybe what that means necessarily, but showing you that this is from the start, that your concept of your identity on this platform is unique, and yeah, kind of exposing that to the user in a way from the beginning is some really conscious choices that we made too. So before you play with the tree, well, up until recently, it was actually just a single global tree. And then of course we figured we need to isolate one tree from another tree and give people the ability to work specifically on projects, and not just projects, but they should be able to share them. So, or to have like a private project that's shared between people. And that was a really interesting set of questions to explore. How are we going to do that with Holochain? And if you're interested, David, we can talk about that or not.
Yeah, sure.
Well, yeah, it's great because it took a concept, I guess, that people had kind of tossed around in the Holochain ecosystem for quite a long time, from kind of just talk to action. Like, okay, how would we actually do this? Which was basically the concept that a single application might not just employ one DNA or two DNAs, but that you would create a different DHT per things that needed to remain private and separate from one another. And so when we create a new project in Acorn, it's actually doing that. It's it's creating a unique DNA each time that I go to create this project. So and that corresponds to this secret. And the secret, if someone knows the secret, then they can join the project. They can join the DNA because the secret is the only thing that's unique to this project as distinct from another one. So this is your key, if you will, that gives you access to another DNA. So technically, like, you're still using, and if I created another one, yeah, obviously it's going to give us a new secret, but the thing kind of to note about once this comes up, right, is that each of these is their own DNA. And that means that they're completely private from one another. There's no chance of data that someone's not supposed to be able to access being accessed by others on the application. So, and it does that by cloning a sort of a template DNA, which is for a project, and giving it a simple unique identifier, a sort of UUID, which is related to the project secret. So if I were someone else, I could just paste in a project secret, which is a 5 rememberable words, and join the project. And that was an interesting process too. How do you make it so that someone can discover whether this is a real existing project that they've been invited to or not in a decentralized space? So yeah, so just that part was an interesting process. And then you launch a project, and this is where you're into the tree. And so you start it with a clean slate, and we talked about kind of the idea of a really, let's say, high level goal. I'm thinking of 300 down. We're back down to 300 million. What is it? 300 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. And this is the state of affairs that I want to be true in the world. And if we broke it down into, so this is kind of, we're creating a child of this high level one. And I'm in Canada. Let's say that Canada tar sands don't run anymore, or don't produce anymore. And maybe Canada fully runs on electric cars. So these are some of the things that I'm breaking this down, and I could go further and further with that kind of process. You also have a recent feature that we were working on and released is more kind of like tree editing. So that you can not just build the tree out this way, but that if you, because we found that, you know, sometimes, I don't know, you're just like on the fly, you don't know exactly where this goes. And so you're creating ones that are disconnected from the tree. And if you want to do this later editing, we developed this, we designed and developed this system that lets you kind of drop a new node onto the tree somewhere else in the tree. And so this forms a connection and adds this node into the tree, and we can select an edge and delete it too, and reorganize the tree this way. And these trees can get really big, but I want to show you, so that it can be a very kind of big, fleshed out tree. I want to show you some of the other parts of the editor. So there's just quick editing here, and there's different things, metadata that we can associate with what we call, generally speaking, goals or outcomes. And goals have statuses as uncertain, incomplete, in process, in review, or complete, and the colors to go with them. And one of the key ideas is that the idea of the uncertain, because if you haven't figured out how much work this thing is going to be yet, then you leave it as uncertain. If you have estimated how much work this is going to be and you've got it broken down into all the sub work, then you can just say this is incomplete. And this is, yeah, this is incomplete too, and this is incomplete. And eventually the relationships between these things are going to be automated instead of all manual. So if certain things underneath this goal are incomplete, then this one should obviously be incomplete too. But we haven't wired up all of that sort of propagation of those things yet. And there's also the concept of the hierarchy I was mentioning about, is this, would you call this a root goal? We call root, trunk, branch, or leaf. My favorite are leaves because they show up with a little leaf icon here and the thing. And when you turn them all green, it's actually really nice, because especially if we've got the leaves, and turn this into a green leaf on the tree. So here you see when the tree goes green, that's kind of your, and then this one should be green if those ones are green too. So now I'm kind of introducing the kind of methodology around it. There's some other important concepts built in here, the one of priority. So the idea is that the app should help you know what to work on. And we approach this by providing a voting system for how urgent, important, impactful, and effortful this particular goal is. And when I weigh in on this topic, I can say this is very urgent, not so important. I think it's going to be really high impact for not very much effort, and then I save my vote. And because it's only my vote, this should, let's see. Oh, didn't save. Oh, okay, let's set this back again. Oh, there it goes. This is, so the aggregated priority is actually the averages of the votes on the different metrics. And these things play into a whole other view that exists, which is a completely different look at Acorn. And this is what we call the priority framework view, which gives you different perspectives on what's urgent and what's important. And I think to see the one that I voted on, we'd have to be looking at this particular one in order to see underneath it what's urgent and important within this goal. So this one has been voted on, and it's in less urgent and more important when I look in this framework, and it's in more impact and less effort in this framework when I look through this lens. So, so we're really playing with kind of, and these things sort automatically too. So if we had a couple different things and we weighed in. It's gonna work. Yeah, there it is. I thought we did. Oh. There we go. Oh, there it is. I don't know why I wasn't seeing it. So here we have like two of them showing up, one in more impact and less effort, one in less impact and more effort. So if I was someone who was working on this, who was working with Acorn, I would obviously, I would probably want to start with the goal that was more impact and less effort naturally. And so this is part of the app that we don't have yet, but people can say, oh, well, we have part of it built so far, but the idea would be that, okay, so I'm going to assign myself Canada fully runs on electric cars. Now, these are bad examples because they're too high level and they're too high up, but I would add myself to this particular one, and I would be sort of like assigned or a member of this particular one. So through that, we would be tracking who's working on what, and that's an important thing when we're looking at the tree, seeing who's working on what parts of the tree. So there could be more that I could show you. There's exports, there's data exports, and there's editing your profile, and we're also pretty happy to develop this concept of being able to have flexibility of using a trackpad or using a mouse, still having the navigation and stuff like that work smoothly on the different devices. But yeah, that's a quick tour. What anything coming to mind, David? Or
no, it's very beautiful.
Yeah, I kind of like, it's almost like you need a whole bunch of stuff ready-made to kind of elaborate in a tree, but it's pretty fun when you see it get big, like when you see how it really breaks down, when there's just like lots of things going on underneath, or a deeper hierarchy too. And yeah, so there's other stuff we can do too to kind of smooth out. Like for example, we'd like to add animations from one state to the next state when it reorganizes the tree, so that you can easily keep track of things. There's still a long backlog of like things to build and things to do, but it's certainly to a point where we think you could pretty much use it as is, you know, in a simple way. You could start using it and do kind of like, one of the goals is to dog food, right? Which is we want to use it to build, we want to use Acorn to build Acorn. And so we kind of see that point. It's not maybe too far off on the horizon. There's also this view. I didn't show this view. It's called the expanded view, and it gives you more data like a time frame. And there's also a description that you can have for the task, just basic stuff that you would obviously want to be associated with a goal. And then you can also have a history, which I think is really useful, a history of this goal. And that's another thing that complements well with Holochain, because of course, anytime that you update something in Holochain, it's just added to your ledger. And so you're just pulling from the ledger to get the history, like of a goal, for example. And there's, you can also have comments, comments on things, and have a comment thread. Yeah, you saw all these different ones. Yeah, we're really trying to pay attention to the details. There's little animations that you see. We worked a lot on the animations. This kind of pops up. Other things like, oh, I didn't show you the multi-editor. So if you this is a way that you can edit many cards at once, because that can be really inefficient or tedious to edit cards individually. So I could convert multiple cards back to uncertain if I select them. And there's these multi-select features and stuff like this, including this, like a box select. Yeah, so I mean, we're at this point where it would be really exciting to put it in people's hands. But unfortunately, we can't guarantee yet, like basically data, because this is still running on Holochain Redux, we can't necessarily guarantee people data consistency or data, many assurances in terms of if they were want to use this in production, because there were still some flaws, some inconsistencies we would notice. We would use it and what you would see, my tree looks different than your tree. How are we going to stay on the same page if I'm not seeing that goal that you just created? Yeah, so we've been able to do a little bit of like user testing, where you just kind of give it to people, put it in their hands and see how they work with it. But we haven't been able to go to the point with it where you say to people, please adopt it, please put your real world data and project management into here, because we just didn't want to take on or present people with those types of risks, or be liable or something, for whatever might happen. So that's where we hope to be going with it, though, is to have that level of assurance in the product that you could say to people, jump on board and start using this day to day. That's our goal.
Cool. Could we look at the Holochain side a little bit?
So how Holochain fits into this is, we had to package the Holochain binary in with this Electron application. So for example, most people don't know about this, but apps you can click show package contents and you can drill into what's actually inside. They kind of nicely hide all of that away, but you can drill down in there and show you this view, so that if you drill into what's actually inside of Acorn, where did it? Yeah, it's there. So we're drilling down into Acorn, and then you go into app. Here we go. So two of the binaries that Holochain builds, 𝐀𝐶 and Holochain, are bundled in with this. And there's a bunch of tricks that we did to make it so that the user never, has to touch Holochain or think about Holochain. And some of those have a little bit of room for improvement in terms of like security options for in the future. Let's say that you're just like, okay, we want to push this into production. We want all the maximum security options out of this too. We would probably we would change the design of it to introduce a step where you would write a password. You would in the UI, you would write a password into the app when you launch, and the password would secure your private key while it's being generated. Right now, what we do is we use a flag that's built into Holochain called null pass, which is just it nullifies the password or sets a default password that it knows to, or something like that, to unlock the private keys. So it's an insecure but smooth system, and you wouldn't use it in production, but it's been good for what it for the purposes of testing so far. So when you launch, what we do is we check. Well, I can show that even from here. This is something we did recently. Is we added a couple of quick links back into the folders where things are actually stored. And for example, your personal data that Holochain is writing to your file system is actually here in this config folder that I just opened from the application. So you kind of connect back. You see these two. These are my two project instances. These are the DNA. These are the source chains, and the for those two projects that I created. So this is the storage, the file system storage. It's also where the private key gets written. It's not just the private key. It's the key format that Holochain uses. You can call it anything. We just call it keystore.key. And it's also the conductor config, which is obviously what the Holochain conductor runs itself based off of. And this file stores all the configuration, and it gets updated automatically when you add new project instances and stuff like that. It was interesting combining. We have this one global DNA, which is the profiles DNA. So technically, like you and me, David, if you were to run Acorn, we would already be able to know one another, even if we didn't join one of the same projects, because we're in a sort of a global DHT that's purely for user profiles. So I could find you in the directory and say, or something if I tried, or if we enabled that kind of feature, because we left the profiles DNA as a kind of global one, and we only made the project's DNA the private one. And those are kind of the key parts. Because this is an actual DNA file with all the WebAssembly code in it. I think it's the WebAssembly code for like projects, for the project's DNA. And what we did when you launch the application, I'll kind of show you how this works. Like, because if I quit and then I reopen it, obviously I want it to remember my identity and to have saved all of my stuff. So all of this stuff is saved into this folder, this Acorn folder. And when I launch it again, you notice, okay, of course I don't have to sign up again this time because I signed up the first time. But how it knows that is that it looks in this directory to see if these files exist. And if they do exist, then it just launches and loads those files. If they don't exist, then it has to generate these things. So it generates your private key the very first time that you launch the application. So if we go back, or if I delete everything in here and I quit the application, when I launch it again, it'll take me back to the sign up, and we'll see how it goes back to sign up, and there it's already generated a new private key for me. That's what it does when it launches for the first time, is it generates a config and the private key and stuff like that. And that's stuff that's managed in the Electron application. So, and it's not that much code that sort of controls Holochain, if you will, that sort of manages Holochain instead of the user having to manage Holochain. It's mostly in a single file that's only, I mean, it's only 300 lines of code long, and not all of that is the code that's managing Holochain, but a bunch of it is. For example, here we see exactly what I was just talking about. If the config and keys exist, if they don't, create. So if the keys exist, it just checks where it expects them to exist. Then it just starts the conductor. And if not, we say could not find existing public key, now creating one and running setup. That's when it does the 𝐀𝐽 step, when it generates your private key for you. And that's using the 𝐻𝐶 binary. And then it reads your public address from the key that it just generated. And then it sets up the conductor config as another step, and then it starts the conductor. So this is the code that manages Holochain from the Electron side, and it's not that much code, but from my perspective, it's very impactful code, because it means that it really required us to do something like this to optimize the experience, the end user experience, and make it really smooth. And yeah, so it's just that's been a pattern that has worked well for us since we kind of came up with it and employed it in Acorn. And I wrote, I don't know, do you remember, David, see the big blog post that I made about releasing? It was a massive piece of writing. It was about how to release with Acorn, or no, how to ship your HAP. Did you see that?
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of is a full tour of the code and everything too. So I guess I can show, where's that open dev? Yeah, it was good. They published it to here it is, to the open dev blog, and it's just this massive deep dive. These are a million links down into the code, because the thing is, how is all of that code going to be useful to people if they have no high-level context or orientation? So it was really satisfying to prepare this write-up and to show people that there's a way to bundle Holochain into a end user facing application today, and to have it like work just like you see with like Acorn works. But it was tricky. There were especially some tricky steps to get there, especially for releasing it for Mac. Just because Mac maintains like a very tight security system, and so there was a lot of like, how do you ship an Electron app that has Holochain bundled in, make it security compliant? Because every time you'd launch Acorn for Acorn for Mac, you get developer not identified, or you get different warnings or different like things like that. And you're like, this is not, you know, comforting to people to have to click through these different levels of like developer not identified, or it just wasn't even had to override some of how Holochain was actually what do you call it? The build system for Holochain. It included these, because it's built with Nix, it included these third-party dependencies or something in the references in the binary, and then you're trying to verify it for Mac. You're trying to sign your code, and it was saying we can't sign these things that are like these external references from this binary that you're trying to bundle in with your package, because they don't even exist. And so had to overwrite some of the way that the Holochain binary was being shipped. There's things that, like, hopefully, I would say that they've got to be lessons for the core team. Not every developer shouldn't have to do some of the steps that we had to do to release Acorn. Some of these things are ideally folded back into core rather than the responsibility of app devs, because it was hours upon hours of debugging and working on things that fundamentally relate to core. So hopefully it can serve in that way too. It's kind of crazy to me, just like diving into everything. It's just, it's been such a process, and it's not always been like, we're not exactly building for a specific client, nor are we trying to sell it. So it's all kind of a little bit hand wavy sometimes, or where's it going, or where's you know, you hope other people are referencing it. I've heard that it's been useful to other people in the Holochain developer community. I think I'd like to see that it was more useful to more people, because I don't hear as much buzz as I would like to hear, kind of like really relating back to it. But maybe those times are coming, or maybe there's a lot of people who aren't saying anything, and you don't really know. There's a lot that's invisible, that goes on invisibly when you're just dealing with, like, it's an open source repo. You don't know who comes and who goes. So yeah.
Wow, well, thank you so much.
What was your experience of my tour of it?
Yeah, as I said, one of the thing that struck me is how beautiful the interface was and how much care has been taken.
Mm.
And then, yeah, the thought in putting it all together, coming through not the article, but then coming through how you shared and what you shared, and yeah, just it's really nice to see an application running like that. And start to imagine the possibilities, some of the DHT choices. Just, yeah, it's just great to see something really well thought through and built.
That's been kind of like our real core hope for it, is that it serves as a kind of like a flag in the ground or something like that, like that kind of thing, that it sets it creates something that's aspirational for ourselves and for other people, in a sense, that shows the landscape of what's possible. And no, so I'm really glad to hear that. And yeah, a lot of attention. I mean, that's Pega's influence. She's such a detail-oriented person too. And I mean, of course, I like quality, and I like the details too. I like it to look beautiful, but I'm not personally and single-handedly capable of making it that beautiful, or that well conceived and kind of well-rounded and everything like that. So that's all of her influence, and all of props kind of sharing over in that direction, because yeah, we've got, for what you see, we've got a complete set of mock-ups, of sketches and design files that preceded the product. So like there's a whole library of, here's all the components, a visual library, right? And so you've got this entire, you've got a spec that you're building off of too. You know how many pixels wide this border should be, and those kinds of things. It's such relief as a developer for me too. And of course, she actually did a lot of the CSS and the actual stylistic, some of the really detailed stylistic stuff too. It's a huge collaborative effort in terms of her background is design, but also like I was teaching her to code in React along the way and teaching her. So she's like going through this amazing learning process, and she's quickly becoming like a CSS wizard through the work process of like learning how to do all these things, create little animations and stuff, and getting a whole bunch of joy out of tailoring the CSS. CSS is like my hell. So, so when your skills are like really complementing one another, it's a joy to build and a joy to work on. I even have all these like Adobe XD links, you know, that like I could just send you a link and you could go see all the designs. This is what preceded the build of Acorn so far, and it continues to. I mean, that's our process. So really, we've been working off the best process that we can as well, and process is really important to us. Process and the end result. Really care about the details of the end result. And yeah, it's been exciting to me too to see that that's possible on Holochain. I really wanted to see something like that because I wanted to know too for myself, like that we can do this, we can build this kind of thing on Holochain, like to have that sort of assurance so that you know, like all the time you're investing into learning about it and keeping up to date and all that kind of thing, that it's all worth it too. There's still challenges there. I mean, there's so much turnover, and then the switch to RSM is like a whole new refactor and stuff, but I understand the reasons for that rewrite, and so far as I've been working with it, I've been pretty happy. And it's sort of like we've turned over the code so many times to keep up and to kind of it's like in the process of exploring all the edges and stuff. So so like I guess looking forward to the day when there's a stable release and we're just going off that, and it's like that'll be the day.
Yeah.
Joyful, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think I'll close it there, Connor, and hopefully in the next couple of months as things progress, we can take people on another tour.
Yeah. It'll be fully switched over. It's our goal to finish it this month. The rewrite, and then but getting it into production will rely on the networking of Holochain being done, of course. So that'll come when it comes. I know it's in the works, but yeah. Awesome. Thanks, David.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. I'll just thanks everyone for watching, and this is the ecosystem session, and with Connor Turland and looking at Acorn, and getting the tour, exactly the tour of the UI and Holochain, and yeah, thank you very, very much. I'm looking forward to seeing again soon.
Well, David.